Thank you for coming. Appreciate your time. And yeah, so today we're going to have Sundar talking about identity. Sundar, just a little bit of an introduction, is a third year right now at Emmanuel, and he's studying economics. And he's got a great sort of depth of knowledge and breadth of knowledge in the Vedic, in Vedic scripture and Sanskrit texts. And we're very lucky that he is able to, speak with us today. So Sundar, if I haven't said anything, please do introduce yourself as well. But yeah, can we all have a round of applause for Sundar? Take it away, man.
Thank you so much, Ronak. Thank you all for coming. I know it's quite busy. I hope that the super work hasn't got too hard yet. It's okay. I was just talking over here, and I was remembering that when I came, I found it quite intense, to actually settle in. And then at one point, the way that my supervision schedule was that I had 5 supervisions due in across the span of 4 days. And so I was living deadline to deadline. And it looks like people have settled in better than I have. So I thought mine was the average Cambridge experience. So I hope yours is not that bad. Having said that, you'll get used to it. It's not easy, but you'll get used to it. You'll be all right. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about identity. Now, this topic is crucial for several reasons. First and foremost, whenever you talk about identity, you have to talk about purpose. And whenever you talk about purpose, you have to talk about identity, because those two things are inextricably linked. You cannot separate purpose from identity. Fundamentally, the way that you define yourself impacts the way you look at your outlook in life. So identity. Right, the first thing is, just before we get into the actual topic of identity, the purpose of KC-SOC as a society, for those who haven't been before, or even if you've been before, just to remind you, is to provide a different perspective on things, right? Everyone sees the same reality in terms of what they take in, but because of their nature of their consciousness, they perceive different things, right? So if someone's a very joyful person, right? Even amidst the most difficult circumstance, you'll find these amazing people that can just take away something really positive from that. And so to try and develop that different perspective is what we're trying to do as a society, by getting people to think so that no matter what the circumstances around them, they can actually take maybe those lessons, try and improve, and use that to develop themselves. And so more than trying to impart wisdom, it's actually providing people the tools to think about things themselves, right? So one of the things we'll do later today is experiential learning, which, if any of you have been to therapy and things like that, this is often what they do. It's a very, very powerful technique. Another thing we're going to talk about later is journaling as well. So things like this, which actually allow you to understand yourself, but more importantly, provide you the tools to navigate those challenges in life, right? I mean, I don't know if any of you play chess, but if someone plays chess and you had Stockfish in your ear telling you every move, you'd win every game, and then Stockfish would stop, and then you'd go back to being a 400 elo player, right? You wouldn't actually be able to do anything. So rather than that, actually being able to learn, coming here, having these discussions, they're amazing, but also taking something away and implementing it's really important. And so the idea is to treat this as a so-called spiritual science, if you will, right? Science is based on theory and then also on practical experience. And in that same way, we're trying to get people to think about that. I don't want this to be just an abstract discussion. We just say, oh yeah guys, identity, yeah, great, whatnot, and then everyone leaves and it's just back to the same old thing again. I actually want to provide you something, at least just one thing, where you think, you know what, that's a neat bit of kit. I just want to apply that in my life. I want to try and see what happens if I use that in my day-to-day. Something like that, to rewire your perspective. So when you're looking at this, I want you to think both theoretically, but also practically as well. And if something's too theoretical, and you think this is just not practical, put your hand up, let me know. And if you think the other way as well, just let me know. So, can we get a volunteer to read this out? It's a bit of a nice little poem. Sorry, the font is a bit hard, but I made this PowerPoint when I was in my second week of Michaelmas, when I was doing the same talk. So it is very much like a kid's PowerPoint in many respects, and you'll see that. I thought this was really cool when I put the big question mark on the screen as well. Anyone? Any volunteers? Go on.
The paradox of our time in history is that we have taller buildings but shorter tempers, wider highways but narrower minds. We we spend more but have less. We buy more but enjoy less.
So the idea is that in so many ways, society is developing. From the Industrial Revolution onwards, we have seen economic growth in society on a scale that's never been seen before. That is genuinely something that's absolutely phenomenal. Technology is progressing so quickly. There's that rule, right, in like computer science that every 7 years or something, the number of, what's it?
I think every 2 years, like the rules kind of stop, but every 2 years the number of chip transistors in a chip doubles.
Yes, the number of transistors in a chip doubles every 2 years. Like, that's the rate of advancement is very, very fast. So technologically, we see this kind of thing. You're seeing cures to illnesses that historically have not been cured for centuries. You're seeing developments in science and medicine in ways that just were not possible in the past, right? If I wanted to send like a message to, I don't know, my family members in India, I'd have to like write a letter or something. And I genuinely don't think I've written a letter in I don't know how long. Unless it's a birthday card, I don't think I've written down in a very long time. So if I just want to speak to someone now, it's just a push of a button on my phone. That's as simple as it is. And so you're seeing in so many ways we are making technological advancement. Things have improved a lot. But there's more to society than just things. There's people. And the question is, are people improving? As a society, are we improving? If you look at technological and scientific measures, absolutely. But if you look at things like mental health, right? It's on the decline. People are feeling more isolated than ever before. But that doesn't make sense. People are more connected than ever before. How is it that they're feeling so lonely? Why is it that is, what's going on, you know? We have more options than ever, but people still don't feel satisfied with the choices that they're making, right? And so, if you take, someone does PBS here, right? So for those of you that do psychology and look into the actual psychology of these things, you'll find a lot of interesting theories that are proposed. I won't go into so many today, but it's quite fascinating to understand parts of identity that people often neglect, right? And so, as well as understanding very much the physical and the outer world, a lot of this talk's going to be focused on the inner world, the part of the identity that people neglect. That inside reality is just as concrete and just as real as the external reality, but people neglect it completely. If you talk to people, they'll be like, yeah, of course, I'm taking care of my body in this and this way. But then there's more to them, and often that's neglected. So we want to try and get people to focus on that. And I think that this is a really nice quote by Einstein. We can't solve our problems with the same thinking that we used when we created it. We need a higher level of knowledge to actually solve a problem. And I won't go too much into detail about material thinking and materialism. You guys discussed that a bit in the last lecture. But let's take something like in America in the 1970s. Does anyone know what the biggest problem was in America in the 1970s? Ronak smiled. I think. Do you remember this, Ronak?
Is this the cow?
Huh?
The cow done one?
Not cow. Horse manure.
Oh, sorry.
The streets of New York were just filled with tons of horse manure. Sorry, this is not the 1970s. This must be the 1870s. Just a century out. Just a century out. They were just filled with horse manure because everyone used to travel in a horse and carriage, and obviously the horses had to do their business somewhere, and so it ended up just getting pushed to the side of the street. And a variety of diseases were coming from that. It was like there was, I can't remember the stat, was something like 50 tons or something was having to be cleaned a day. It was crazy. And then came the invention of the car, and they said, you know what, guys, we've solved it. We've got the car. We've put all problems to an end. And now, they're like, oh, these cars, they're so bad. They're polluting the environment. What do we do now? We're just moving the problem from one place to another. It's like when you have a really heavy weight on your back, you take it and then you move it onto your shoulder. It's like you've not really done much. The weight's still very much there. How do you actually get rid of these things? And so there's a lot of problems that we have, but because we don't really upgrade our thinking beyond a certain level, we're not actually removing the problem. We're just transferring it from one place to another. And I want you to come back to that at the end of this, because that's the practical side of understanding the philosophy that we're going to discuss today. Okay, I need a volunteer. Do we have any volunteers? Let's come up. Don't worry, I'm not going to interrogate you or anything.
I think Sumanshu is a good one.
Yeah, Sumanshu, you're looking. Sumanshu, can you come up here, please? Can we get a round of applause for Sumanshu? Okay.
Sit down and stand.
You can stand. So, Sumanshu, everyone, this is Sumanshu. He's studying engineering at Johns. He's a second year. How many of you actually know Sumanshu? Kind of ish? Alright, okay, that's good. That's going to work for the rest of you then. So, who is Sumanshu? Right? You might think, okay, well, the introduction I've given is sufficient. But if we're trying to look at this empirically, right? Let's be empirical. We're academics here. How would we analyze Sumanshu? Well, the first thing we'd do is figure out from biological facts. So what kind of biological facts would you figure out? What would you, if you try to understand someone biologically? Come on, the medics are all here. We have 4 medics here.
I don't know my blood type. I don't know my blood type.
Clearly you don't know who you are, mate.
He's
What
a
else?
male. He's a male.
He's a male. Okay. I don't know.
I am.
Okay. Anything else? What else would you know biologically? What information can you figure out about someone?
He's a certain height, he's a certain weight.
He has
just-
bad eyesight.
I don't like this. I don't think it was that.
Okay, so you can figure out certain information about his height, his weight, what did you say, blood type, about how his organs are performing, you know, about how healthy, how fit he is, how good his heart is. You'd find out all this information about him, right? And if we were going to become more empirical, because that's a lot of qualitative information in there, let's go more empirical, and we take that biology and we kind of condense it a bit more. We go into chemistry. Now we're not in the realms of processes and functions, we're looking more at interactions between atoms, elements, molecules, and just looking at reactions that occur. Alright, so now you have Sumanshu, and you have probably this massive blackboard of all his chemical data, of all the reactions that are happening in his body. Alright? And I say, come on, we need to be even more empirical than this. And you'll end up with physics. It will end up in just dealing with interactions between things on the level of energy, understanding how atoms react, how matter reacts, how it transfers in different ways, how those reactions are actually set up from the ground level up. And then I say, come on, we can do more than that, right? And you're just left with a bunch of maths equations. And let's say you were to plaster the walls of Jesus College with the maths equations that you now have from all this evidence, all this data that you have, right? And someone, because they're jobless, has nothing else to do, and they read all of these maths equations, and they understand them. Do they understand Sumanshu here? This is a discussion. This is open to discussion. That's not a rhetorical question. Right, Sumanshu, what do you think? Do you think they understand you?
No. I feel like I'm more than maths.
You feel like you're more than that?
That's just
What
me
were you saying?
personally. though.
Anyone else? Go on.
I think so. Like, it seems ridiculous because, like,
That's all he is, you know.
I
He
think
knows you as well.
we don't have the capabilities, of course, to be able to process all that information, but I feel like we would get a pretty good understanding of who you are. As in,
Go on, I want to hear ideas. Yeah, go for it.
We wouldn't be able to, because that would be a purely materialistic reduction, and so it would miss everything about his conscious experience. You just wouldn't be able to get.
So you're saying that consciousness is something that's just simply not understood through the
it's
physical
just
or material interactions that happen.
removed from matter entirely. I
Mhm.
mean, matter certainly makes up his body, but it doesn't determine his consciousness.
Do you have something to say?
Yeah, like part of his experience is something that like he might be good at. Like say he plays a sport or whatever, and that could be, I don't know a lot about neurochemistry, but like if it's in your muscle memory, that might be translated in the maths.
Okay,
equation.
so there maybe is somewhere that
Yeah.
experience is factored in.
Certainly mood would be.
Mood.
Like, yeah, like if he's got, I don't know, depression or, any like other.
Sorry, someone. I didn't know it was something like that.
Serotonin levels, stuff like that.
Okay, like serotonin levels, like
Yeah,
natural
which could influence
natural levels of
mood,
hormones in the body.
exactly.
Okay. So
We
we have
have
different ideas here.
Temperament would
like
be a-
we just taking like a snapshot like view and just taking equations from this moment in this time, or we like taking them across like a range of experiences.
I was gonna take it from just now,
just
like the snapshot of Sumanshu now.
I'd say just from like a one singular point you get like at least some detail but not a lot of detail. But
So what is the difference between? Do you want to explain why you've asked that?
Because I'd say seeing how somebody reacts to certain events might like the context behind events, and then seeing the reactions of neurons, like etc. If you couldn't understand it, like we can't understand
Okay.
it.
So
Could help
our
that.
friend here was saying that maybe experience, consciousness would not be captured to some extent. And you said maybe some level of experiences, and you're saying if we find out how this person acts in different experiences, even though we might not be able to understand consciousness fully, we can understand the level of how this person interacts in different situations to get more information about him.
Yeah, like theoretically, if you did like understand everything about the human brain,
Yeah.
everything about the human body, and then you simulate him through various different experiences, then possibly you'd get like I wouldn't say you get like everything about him, but you get like
a pretty
very
good idea.
idea,
Yeah.
I'd say.
Sorry, I know you've now become like a lab rat, but yeah, it was not meant to be like this. I'm sorry. But yeah, okay, very nice. Any other ideas? Anyone else? Felix?
I agree. Many levels that you would not obviously. You cannot know someone from just numbers. There's far more to their identity than just science. So
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of my stance. But yeah.
Any other takes? Like, there's nothing that we're gonna. I'm not gonna jump at anyone for anything. Go on, Connor.
I guess that on a spiritual level, kind of the physical body is more so of a projection of like a lot of your thoughts and things, and so like mathematics about your physical body it isn't like comparable to like your soul or anything. So you can't really read that from numbers.
Okay, that's good. Any other thoughts? Anyone got to get a word in before we move on? Samancha, how do you feel about this experience?
I think that even if you had me all mapped out mathematically, it won't. I think what makes a person is how they react to situations, and with those equations mapped out, I don't think you can predict how I'd react to anything. So I don't think you know me.
Could I be like
Right, yeah.
devil's advocate? And let's say like we go with Kieran's point of saying, you know, you
You can
map
say that,
out
but
the
you can
maths
say that
of like all of your experiences, and now we know how you're gonna react. Like, as in, we can predict how you're gonna react because we know what you've done in the past, and that the maths is all there. Like, we know how your neurons are working because the maths is all there. So we could predict everything that you're gonna do.
But can you predict the change in my bodily systems as I go through certain situations?
Like neuroplasticity is actually a thing,
Yeah.
right? So like if this man actually does meditate, for example, for 8 weeks, then
I
wouldn't
can
that
predict
happen?
that fine. If he meditates and the neuroplasticity.
So he's just saying I just need a bit more maths.
I'll be honest,
Oh,
I'm
God.
lost now.
You're also, the medics are just staying quiet here. Avni, Arya, my bad.
Like his emotions and feelings, they're so abstract that you can't put that into sort of a box of mathematical equations. I think that's beyond something that you can map similar to other points of race.
Okay.
I feel like you can know kind of maybe even if you can predict how he will react to a certain situation, or if you know like every aspect of how he like functions, how his body works, you will not know his like experience of the world. And I feel like his experience can't be, you can't get that from maths, from numbers, from biology, chemistry, physics. You need to get to know him as a person.
Okay. So you actually have to go to someone, instead of just reading all the equations, you go and say, Samanchu, what's your favourite food? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Samanchu. Please go back. Thank you. Sorry about that. So this was just to get the ideas out, and I'm sure many of you have many disagreements with each other. I'm sure 100% that the medics will have things to say about this, and I mean, I remember from my last experience, I had a whole debate after this. So I'm not going to open this up for too much more debate, but I want to keep those ideas flowing, and then we'll get people to discuss more about this. So the crucial question actually that we are discussing is not just about Samanchu, right? The crucial question that we're actually asking is this. The question is, who am I? Am I understood completely through the level of the physical world? Does the physical approach of understanding me understand the full experience of who I am? Or is there more to me that cannot be captured by that approach? That's actually what we're asking, right? And I think it's fair to say completely that everyone would agree that you have a really good understanding. The question is, would you have a complete understanding or a really good understanding? That's actually the distinction that's going to be made. And so I just want to shed some ideas. So the first thing that Vedic teachings talk about is the fundamental identity of the self versus the apparent identity of the self. And the idea here is something along the lines of you can take on like a new interest or hobby. I could become interested in skiing. Okay. And so then I could tell people, okay, when they ask me who I am, I'm a skier. Does skiing define me? In what way does it define me if it defines me? In what way does it not define me? Right? So I'm sure you've all got some thoughts. Anyone got any instant things that they want to say about this?
Like a property of you being a skier that could change over time. So I don't think it like accurately defines you that well, because you like skiing today, you're not gonna like skiing tomorrow maybe.
Okay. Fine. Anything else?
Yeah, it's just the same as contingent. It's not something essential.
It's not necessary.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's something contingent. I'm skiing today. I like it today, but I'm still very much Sundar tomorrow, even if I don't like skiing. Right? Make sense? Like, I'm not going to not be Sundar tomorrow if I don't like skiing. So there is still a part of me which is completely unchanged, where there is a part that has changed. And so all of a sudden now, this idea of identity, which we often treat as just like this one pinpoint, has become so many layers. Because it's like, oh wait, there's that surface layer of I like skiing, I don't like skiing. And that is kind of a part of your identity in some not very deep sense, very surface level. But then on a deeper level, I am still Sundar. Like, that's not changed, right? And so then one of the quick things that we sometimes do is we run past all of this. Oh, I forgot to put the animations on. I was going to say, that's all the stuff that your bodily makeup is made of. And if you were to go and get that on the market out there, at 2022 market prices, you would get it as, it costs about £1.60, right? So, if I now choose Somanshu, and I say, what is the value of Somanshu's existence?
116.
How many of you think 116 is a satisfying answer? Be honest. That's your ops right there.
Valid.
Well, the first thing that you're all going to say to me is, obviously this is a far too simplistic approach. Because like, I don't know, something like this TV screen or this tripod is also made of elements, and if you crush them down to their elements, the elements would have a very small value, but the objects and the structures and the manner in which they're put together will have a higher value. So I do agree, it's not going to be 116. But then my question is, how much is a person, a human being, worth?
Depends to who.
No, that's a really good point. Okay. Do you want to elaborate a little bit?
Like if you're working for a company, how much you worth to them should be different than how much you worth to like your wife.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean?
So it depends on like the actual supply and demand, if you like. So how much is the person actually demanded for a certain situation?
Like, supply demand, and also like the relationship, like the nature of the relationship.
Right. Okay. So is there any relationship that grasps the actual intrinsic value of a person? It's an open question. Yeah. I mean,
except for the relationship to self. Probably not.
Okay, so the relationship one has with himself, yeah?
Like an ideal relationship with yourself, maybe.
Okay, fine. Very nice. I'm sure all of us agree that it's not going to be £1.16, right? I'd hope so. Ronix, yeah? You okay? Yeah, okay. So don't worry, I'll if I had to choose between you or £1.16 so much, I'd still choose you right now.
For sure.
That's what they all say. And then they switch up on you. It's crazy. You know, one of the things I was looking at while I was looking in this concept of actual worth and value is, you know, people get their body parts insured, like sports people and actors. So Daniel Craig, who played James Bond, actually he had his whole body insured at a value of $9.5 million when he was in the film. CR7, Cristiano Ronaldo, his legs are insured at, any guesses? We'll do higher and lower. In dollars, millions of dollars.
20 mil.
20 mil, higher?
I think 100 more.
Higher?
500.
Lower.
No, okay.
400.
Lower. A lot lower.
250.
A lot lower.
120.
A bit more.
150.
A bit less.
122.
140 million?
140 ish.
Yeah.
His
What's
legs
it
were.
mean to enjoy your legs?
Let's say you were to see Cristiano Ronaldo and you kicked him in the legs and you damaged one of his legs. You'd have to pay, like, not one, let's say you damaged his legs completely.
Yeah.
You'd have to pay him 140 million.
I would.
Yeah. Because
How should we make up these fake rules?
because that's how much his legs are worth, according to like the value he adds to the world is 140 million in legs.
Yeah.
Okay. But even then, right? We'll take the body as not just its element, but its actual complex substructures, right? Now I take Somanchu again. So sorry. And I take Somanchu's eyes out and I put them on a plate. Huh? They're not worth much. But the point is, so he's not his eyes, right? Like I can put his eyes over here in a plate, and he's not his eyes. Somanchu is still very much him. But I could do that with every part of his body. So what defines him as him, right? Because I could take a leg off, and then Somanchu's leg is here, but Somanchu is still there. So which part of the body is Somanchu? You see what I'm saying, right? Like if I cut my hand off, my hand's not going to start, complaining about it because it's no longer, it's just a dead hand. I say it's just matter. But I'm still alive. But then which part of my body is then actually me? Thoughts?
I feel like, hypothetically, if it's take his brain or heart out, I feel like.
Sorry, this got really dark really quick. Sorry.
I don't think you're still you if your brain's not there, or likewise with your heart. As in any other body part.
So you think people that get a heart transplant are not bad?
Okay. Okay, brain.
Okay.
You can have some of your brain cut out and you'll still.
Shush. As in.
Whoa! Great and decorum. Casey talk. It's a spiritual setting.
That's actually a good point too.
But that's only some of your brain, right? All of your brain.
Yeah.
I still think
not
some of
difference
brain.
if you
Then
got
you're
yeah,
just
some
dead.
brain.
Then you're just
Then you're
dead.
just dead.
Okay. What are you saying?
I was saying if like you have some of your brain out, then your personality changes.
Mm-hmm. We do see that, right? That's like the whole thing of like how they figured out the frontal lobe works. Because that guy, Phineas Gage had his the front part of his brain was just yeah. He had a thing that like a metal rod that went Okay, so we've established We've established very quickly that there's two things that we're thinking about first and foremost: the brain and the heart. But then the heart transplant thing made sense, right? So like it's got to be something about the brain, and I do agree there is a lot about the brain, which is very fascinating, and this is why spirituality and psychology go hand in hand. So you guys will enjoy this more out of everyone. Unfortunately for you, I don't do psychology, so I won't be able to relish it in the same way that Bhavini would have presented it last year. She was a psychology student. She was really good, and so the idea is there is a very clear material aspect of the self which does characterize one's identity, and that is the brain in this case. But then, let's say I did the same thing with the body, right? I took like the eyes and then blah blah blah. Which part of the brain makes up Samantra?
Neuroscientists and psychologists would say like what the prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex.
Because they say that that's kind of got your identity, personality, these kinds of things.
So has it got your identity in it, or is that your identity? Is that look, I have this laptop and it's got my PowerPoint in it, but the PowerPoint is not my laptop, right? So same thing here. We can't make a distinguish between the two. I'm just saying we can't actually distinguish between the two.
Just like a thought, but I feel like saying what area of the brain makes up the personality, the identity is almost akin to saying like what area of a rainforest makes up the rainforest. Like is it
so the question itself is
trees, is it the ground? Do you know what I mean? It's probably like an agglomeration, just all of them like put
So
together.
you're saying it's the actual combination of those various aspects of the brain.
Yeah, well,
which
just
form
like,
the brain.
Yeah.
And then we still not answered whether it's like the identity, where identity comes from. But I do agree. You are right in many respects. Like it's fair to because in many respects, Sumanchu is quite different once you've taken his eyes and legs out. So I would agree, completely different. So yes, it's not a fair question to say just which part. But I'm just trying to get people to think about what is identity. So there is a lot of this level of identity, which I talked about. Your heart can quickly be changed. There's parts of your brain that can, and whatnot. But beyond that, there is clearly an aspect of the self, like what identifies me as me, is something that's actually constant, right? Not just my hobbies, my interests, not just my physical, because if I lose my leg, I hope that you'd all still say I'm me. You wouldn't be like, oh, this guy's different, you know? Like, I hope that you'd all say that, right? And so there is something there about identity and the fundamental identity of the self which is unchanging. Does anyone recognize this guy?
Is that you?
That's me. All of them are me. I don't remember the date. I mean, that one's 6th of June 2008. I do know that. But yeah, all of that, like, they're all me. Now, you've probably heard about this thing of, like, the amount of cells in your body that are regenerated every 7 years. Like, the majority of your cells in your body are regenerated every 7 years. So even that physical makeup, which identifies me as me, is it me? Or am I completely, like, 98% new to what I was 7 years ago? Or am I still Sundar? It's like, the first one is just not Sundar. Thoughts? You'd still, thank you. At least one person thinks it, guys, come on. I didn't switch up on you that quick, did I? Yeah, so like, it's still me, but the physical body that makes me up is very much not. I mean, like, this body here and that body in the first image are almost completely different in many, many respects. Of course, the parts that we talked about that are constant are still constant. But in so many ways, that's not me. But at the same time, I am still Sundar. And so, when we go to this question about who am I, it's not just understanding what exactly is making up one's complete identity on all these layers. But more fundamentally, we're trying to, if we took away all those layers, what would we come down to? Right? And so, philosophers have tried to talk about this for years. You've probably heard some of those more famous concepts. But like, if we were to take down these things away from the physical, what would it be left with that makes me me? That's the question. That's the crucial fundamental question here. And so, okay, of all the physical, we've kind of left it to the brain. But then the brain very much is just kind of an operating machine. So what is it that makes that the person, me, that's me? Okay? So you could start off something like, okay, if there was me living here, and then a dead version of me here, okay? What's the distinction between the two? Well, instantly, the first thing is that, like, the brain's not braining, the heart's not hearting, right? That's the first thing. Those processes are not working. That's the first thing you'd say. But then, the matter that makes up those systems is actually there. It's just the reactions that are driven in those systems which are not there. Why are those processes not doing what they're meant to? Right? That's like the first thing that you talk about. Like, there's clearly something that's stopping the cessation of all processes of life force. And as you kind of peel away those layers more and more, the idea that it comes down to is this contentious topic of consciousness, right? The Vedic traditions and the Eastern traditions, they often look at the idea of the self and think, okay, yeah, the body does work, and it clearly does make up who you are, but then it's driven by something. There's kind of, in a sense, a life force pushing it to actually let it do what it's doing. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to do what it's doing. And that is consciousness. So there's, of course, part of consciousness, in a sense, which manifests itself in a material way, right? That's how you can actually study, like, the biological processes in my body. That's because they actually do work. But then, there's something beyond that, which is actually driving that. People find this quite a difficult thing to understand. I just, like, can you all imagine you have, like, an orange in your hand? Can you all show me your oranges? Go on. Oh, come on, be more happy. It's a nice orange. It's not a grim orange, it's quite a good orange, okay? So you've all got your oranges in your hand, hold them up. Okay? Now I want you to start peeling that orange. Go on. Aditi, peel your orange.
There's not an orange there.
No, there is. Right? And now take away the peel and you put it to the side. Right? I want you to point at your orange again. Where's your orange? Point at it with the other hand. Okay. Now, you can put your oranges down. If I were to ask you at the beginning, before you peel that orange, what would you have pointed to? It's not hard. The orange with the peel on.
Yeah.
But now when I've asked you to peel that orange and then point to the orange, and I've asked you what makes the orange, the very thing which you would have pointed to earlier is not the thing that you're pointing to now, right? The orange peel, you've gone, oh yeah, that's not the orange. But if I asked you to point at the beginning, you'd be like, oh yeah, that is the orange. But it's not the orange peel that makes up the orange. It's part of it, but once disconnected, it doesn't have the same orangey value that you would have attributed to at the beginning, right? And so, okay, I'm not gonna... I know you'd love this, but just because there's not enough philosophers in the room, I won't go through this in depth. I was going to spend like 20 minutes going through all these theories of consciousness. This idea of consciousness, though, and the thing that drives that force in the body is something that's most crucial to understanding our identity. Because it's that thing that runs the bodily machine, which is actually making us us, right? It's that life force that drives this thing to be what it is, making us us. So that orange peel, which is like the body, is actually not the self, but it's what's covering the self. And the self is what's actually providing the value to that object. I've tried to make that not too complicated. If it doesn't make sense, I'll say it again. But the idea is there is an external layer to our identity, but that's only covering our identity. And if we take that to be our fundamental, complete identity, then we neglect the person that we actually are, we neglect who we are. And so the reason you see these kinds of things is like where people they're doing an amazing job of taking care of themselves, right? Their physical health's on point, they're going to the gym, they're sleeping well, they're eating properly. And you're asking them like, do you feel completely content in life? And they'll say no. Because they've just neglected the whole mental aspect of their existence. That's just a deeper layer to them that they've just not connected with. So it's also part of their identity. When we just reduce in this reductionist approach that we take, and often because it's easy to analyze matter, science just analyzes things at the level of matter. And in fairness, it shouldn't go beyond that because it can't do that. But when we treat things just on that level of physicalism, we reduce the whole identity of the self just to the physical body. And then we go, you just have to take care of that. And then you'll be all right. But because there's actually more to the self. Because you realize, wait a minute, the orange peel isn't the whole point of the orange. There is also more on the inside that I should consider. In that same way, we look at the identity of the individual and we think there's also more there. And there's this part of us which is consciousness. Now, consciousness or experience is quite a complicated thing because something like, pain. You'd think we'd have an amazing way of explaining pain, and we can. You can say like, okay, someone pricks me with a pin over here. Please don't get any ideas. And then they just poke me here, and then what that does is it sends a bunch of reactions all the way to my central nervous system or whatever, and then I experience pain. But that doesn't actually explain why I experience pain. Why is the actual qualia, actual experience that you're having? Why do you feel pain? Why do those electrical signals make you actually experience pain? What is the thing that goes from the physical to the level of experience that forces you to go, oh, this really hurts? What is that? Right? And it's what all these theories they talk about, they have a problem with it. We call it the hard problem of consciousness sometimes. So the idea that there is clearly all this physical makeup that actually makes a person themselves, but then there's more than that, right? If I'm looking at all of you and then I have a camera here that's also looking at all of you, there's a very clear difference between the two. The camera and I, okay, we are both looking. We're both taking in the information. But there's something I'm doing that's different when I'm experiencing that. And there's something it's doing that's different when it's experiencing that. Right? Because my human experience is something of emotion. It's something that cannot be grasped simply through these physical ideas. And so this is, anyway, when you go into philosophy, the hard problem of consciousness.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
What about people some people can't experience pain? Like
Any emotion. But even the fact that we don't process this, right? The fact that when you're looking at me, the fact that you can see me why do those photons that are taken in optic nerve, all of that jazz. Why is that understood as the photo it is? Why does your brain take that in and go, image? Do you see what I'm saying? That this is, like the fact that you're experiencing that is very different, right? Like when the wind rushes over your fingers or something like that. The fact that you take in that sensation and actually treat it as an experience. Nothing is gonna let you understand what experience is if you just reduce everything to physicalism. It just simply won't. Do you have anything you want to add or disagree with?
Yeah, I mean, no, I agree absolutely. It is just a matter of recognizing there's a categorical division between the objective and the subjective. And many narratives that you get from physicalists who try to reduce consciousness to matter say, well, with a certain amount of material complexity, then we become conscious. But you can only ever describe with ever more detail, like basically a list, like you said earlier, mathematical formula that you can paint on Jesus' wall. You can have a very complex list and even an infinitely complex one, but there's a categorical leap that needs to be made to subjectivity.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's what you're trying to highlight.
Okay. Does that make sense to everyone else? At least one person understood me. I'm quite chuffed with that. Anything? Does that make sense? This idea that there is something different between like when I treat someone with all this maths and then I actually go to him and treat him as a person and say like, hey, how are you? What are your experiences like? And he actually reveals to me things about those things. There is a difference there. There is something more than just the external layer of his identity. I'm not going to talk about that. Okay, so here's two things. Here's two properties I don't know if we can say we agree on, but this is two things that are generally agreed on, okay? Which is that the first thing is that something that defines the dead me and the real me, like the living me, the fundamental difference between those two things is consciousness. And consciousness as a driving force, which is why the process of my body is working. Consciousness acting as that living force to run the body. And the other thing that people often do talk about is what I was which you beautifully, eloquently described, that life comes from life, not from matter. In the sense that you cannot just get a bunch of matter and just explain life through that. You can't just force life into something through a complex material composition of things. Or at least consciousness, if not life. That idea is quite crucial. And so, matter is inert in its nature. Its very nature matter's inert. If I had like like this remote here, I'm moving this remote about, right? I've animated this remote. This remote intrinsically won't have animation. It doesn't have that because it's not connected to a field of consciousness, right? And so the idea is that this body, the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, one of these ancient Vedic texts, it talks about the idea that the body is a field of consciousness. Chapter 13, Kshetrajna, right? And it's like, Kshetra means field, like how you have like a field of electromagnetic waves or, gravitational, whatever. You have these fields in physics. In that same way, you have the body, which is a field of consciousness. And so although this might sound weird, I am literally dead before you, as in this physical body has no life to it. It's like when you put your hand into a puppet and then you animate that puppet. There's no one part of me that is alive when you disconnect it from the rest of me. But together it is alive because there is something behind it which is actually pushing the machine to function, the machine of my body to function. And so the idea of this physical self being the actual me is incorrect. But wait a minute, let's not go too fast. The one thing I normally do identify, if someone says, Kalyani, who are you? The one thing you identify with is this physical makeup. So that's a bit of a weird thing. Like, how can I reconcile that with my experience? Because clearly, this is me. And now you've made me think in all these weird mind games that that's no longer me. And the idea is, that the physical body is not the actual self. It's just the covering of the self. It's like the orange peel. And there's a lot more there. And so, so these are some of the examples. We just talked about the orange peel earlier. Sometimes the analogy is given of a bird in a cage, right? So like the cage is like the body, and the bird is like the self inside, which is providing the cage life. But if you don't take care of the bird, you take care of the cage amazingly, then it's not going to go well, right? It's the idea that sometimes an analogy used in some of these Eastern traditions to highlight the importance of prioritizing one's spiritual well-being as well. Or the driver in a car. So like the car is this body. This body allows you to get things done in the world, and so you need a car to go on that journey. At the same time, if there's a car crash, and I'm in a car crash, if someone is in a car crash, right? He's having a rough day, man. You're in a car crash. I'd hope that all of you would go and first thing you check is Somanshu okay? Not, oh God, the car's been injured, right? Because there's clearly a difference in prioritization there. And so the idea that this leads on to is that we take care so much of our physical identity, but the real self, the part of us that's providing consciousness, life force, that spiritual identity that one actually has, if you like, people neglect that. People don't know who they are. It's crazy. None of us know who we are. And that disconnect is what we're trying to overcome through these kind of discussions, through the spiritual practices and so on. And yeah, I mean, the idea is sometimes people say like, how can you, a very simple way of just understanding this is that sometimes you can't see something, but you can perceive its existence. We were recently talking about like a Benedict's test in biology, where you can't see this substance, but you can see the change in colour from like yellow to blue-black. And so you perceive the existence of that thing. And so although you can't see this soul or this spiritual part to oneself, you can perceive its existence through the form of consciousness. And so in that way you can actually value that. And so this is a nice little quote that actually summarizes this discussion quite well, which is, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but rather we are spiritual beings having a human experience. The actual identity of the self is intrinsically spiritual, and it takes on this external layer of material identity. So that's the idea. Yeah. So to summarize, sorry. So to summarize, the idea is, I want people to start thinking about their identity, not just on the way that they'd explain it to others, not just circumstantially what's happening around them, but rather talking about what is that thing that actually drives the body. And when one understands that there's more to one's identity than just the physical self, and they don't just reduce all those layers down to the external, but rather they go deeper to the internal, then they'll be able to take care of aspects of the self which they otherwise would neglect. And when those things are taken care of, then you have like a bigger perspective of the world, right? It changes, you'll experience the same reality that others who don't think about that will also think. Like, you'll have the exact same reality, but your understanding of it will be completely transformed. Because you're going to see this from a bigger picture point of view. When you see that, like, okay, yeah, not only is, I have to go to work, I have to do job interviews, for example. Like, everyone has to do that, fine. But I'm not just doing that because I have to and that is life. Rather, I'm doing that as part of the journey that I'm going on. And when you look at it in that way, it transforms your whole approach to like, what is it then? If I know the needs of my body, what is it that my soul needs? Not my soul, I am the soul. What is it that the soul needs? Right? What are the needs for that? And so, the idea of taking everything down and reducing it to the physical, something like love. If you just say, oh, the only reason love exists in people is for procreation, it's for reproduction. Do any of you actually believe that? Or is there more to that loving relationship when you have a loving relationship?
That was probably just fun fact.
Right, so you all agree that there's more, there's clearly more to a loving relationship than just the physical reproduction. And so when you're inclined to have, when you have that natural proclivity to love and to be loved, when that's the natural kind of nature of the self, then it's not just on that physical level. But when you reduce it to that physical level, then it has no value. And so this is not something new. I mean, the ancient, wisdom texts, they talk about this all the time. Krishna says in the Gita, Jagadahuranishwaram aparasvarasambhutam kimanyat kamahaitukam, that people who take that reductionist view and neglect the spiritual parts of themselves, they'll just say that this world is simply driven by the desire for procreation, and there is no more to love than that. Right? And so that's the kind of view that you'll end up taking. And it can become quite a dangerous one. You can go to kind of ideas of nihilism, that there is no purpose to do anything. Because you've taken what is so beautiful and so deep, and you've just taken it, stripped all those beautiful layers away and just taken it to the external material and physical. So I'm not saying that you don't take care of your body. Of course you do. But at the same time, it's very, very important that we all try and take care of the real self with it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that talk. That was really nice, and yeah, so good to see from a fellow Cambridge undergraduate as well to have such knowledge about kind of the Vedic wisdom. So yeah, thank you so much, Sundar. Does anyone have any questions that they wanted to ask from the talk? If you can't think of anything now as well, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer stuff over food.
Okay, I have a question. So you said that life comes from life, not from matter, at one point. But at some point in the
Future.
no, at some point in the creation of the world and stuff, life must have started at some point, right? So it must have, like at the beginning of life, would it not have somehow been created from matter, like simple, single-cell organisms? Like.
Okay, so no. So that's a really nice question. Simple like single cell organism before it evolved into these more complicated structures, would that not have been from just matter? And so the Vedic tradition says no. It would say that first single cell organism has consciousness in it because that's a fundamentally different characteristic to matter. It's not just a slightly different thing. It's not just like accidentally, whoa, something happens and life comes out of nowhere. But no, that first organism that had life has consciousness, and so it's from that by which life comes. So yeah. And actually, one of the I can't remember whose it is now, but one of the arguments that a certain Chinese philosopher gives for the existence of God also goes along this line, where he's like, well, if life keeps on coming, consciousness keeps on coming from itself, then there must be something which is conscious at the beginning, which therefore creates it. So yeah, those ideas would also be reconciled. Yeah. Okay.
How does one go about understanding the self then? As in, like, you essentially proved that we're not like the body, we're something deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is that? How do I find out more about who I actually am?
So there's the first thing is things like thought experiments, which Descartes did his whole, I think therefore I am. So you can actually understand that there is something there which gives you that ability to experience, which is not me. But understanding more about the soul, well, the idea is, in the same way that if I want to understand quantum physics, I'll go to a person that knows quantum physics very well. To understand more about the self, I want to go to people who have tried to realize the self, right? And so in many ways, you are all, in some way, self-realized, right? Because you have to understand various things about your own identity. And so you'll see these people who are from spiritual traditions. For them, every opportunity is learning experience, because they'll try and take lessons from everything, every person especially. But not just from any, as well as taking lessons from everyone, they'll also try and find those people who are also trying to seek that knowledge about the self, and then ask those people as well. Okay.
When you talk about the self, is that the same as consciousness? That's basically.
Okay, so is the self consciousness?
Is the self consciousness? Is it the same term? Is it the same thing that we're talking about?
I'm gonna give two answers. The practical answer is, for practical purposes, yes, the self is the same as consciousness. But from a more theoretical point of view, no. The idea of this soul or whatever is that it's what provides consciousness for the body.
Yeah. I'm thinking just in terms of things like all the unconscious kind of thoughts and just concepts within your mind, where's that kind of
so that's exactly the reason why, because there is the unconscious part of the self.
Yeah.
Not just the consciousness is considered the self, but that's also part of the self as well. It's exactly that. Perfect. Thank you. Any other thoughts? We can always discuss over food if no one's.
You know how some people say that your identity is kind of like a mosaic of all the people who are around you? Like you take from their interests, their experiences, and you kind of learn it and kind of adapt it into your own identity. Then if you are your consciousness, does it mean that if you're taking all these different things from different people, do you have a shared consciousness with everyone that is around you? Is it one?
Is it like a OneDrive?
Yeah,
just
it's
all
one.
Everyone connects in. That's a really nice question. Thank you. So the idea of there's different ideas which go around. Please do think for yourself as well. But what generally these Eastern traditions they push towards the idea of every individual has their own individual consciousness, in the sense that they interact with other people. There is an interaction there between them, but they're two still distinct individuals in a relationship, and that's how one person's consciousness can affect another person's consciousness. Also, there's different ways we're using the word consciousness here. So there's something in the sense of consciousness we're using as a term for the thing that drives life force, right? And there's also consciousness in the sense of like your state of mind. And so when we use consciousness in the terms that we're discussing in this question, that's more to do with your state of mind. When we're talking about consciousness in the thing that's actually giving the body life, then that's a different thing. All right, let's grab food then, yeah?
Thank you, Sundar. Salam alaikum.